What's up, you guys? Welcome to today's video. As you can tell by the title, we're going to be talking about segregation. I'm going to be telling you guys what it was like to see someone pass away. I'm also going to be telling you about what it was like to spend my days in segregation. Now, I was always a short timer, meaning I didn't serve a decade in prison, and the time that I spent in segregation was short. It would be anywhere from 30 days to 90 days, 90 days being the most time I've spent at one time in a segregation cell. So that was short time. In my personal opinion. There is another YouTuber by the name of Brian Bruton who has served over 2.5 years in segregation after he escaped prison. So basically he served my entire sentence, my last sentence, in segregation. So he has a lot of stories on his channel about segregation. If you want to hear another point of view, I highly recommend his channel. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. A lot of times people don't understand how ignored inmates are. I don't think that's talked about. I don't think the general public has any idea how ignored inmates are, whether they're just in a unit and they're being ignored or they're in a segregation cell and they're being ignored. It happens all the time. And I have personally been in cells with brand new people in county jail that are shocked when they don't see a guard for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 5 hours. So it happens. New York is very different. So I'm going to be specifically talking in this video about my experience in Arkansas. And I did see something similar in Texas when I served a few days there. And I saw something, and I saw this happen also in Kentucky. So it has been my personal experience that prisons and jails in the South, very different than prisons and jails in the North. So north of the wall. Every time I say the North, I think of Game of Thrones. Anyway, so during my time at Sebastian County Jail in Fort Smith, Arkansas, this was the first time where I was genuinely mortified at how female inmates specifically were being treated. Now, I can make an entire video on why I think jails and prisons are sexist, so if you want that video, just let me know, even though it might make some people a little bit mad, but I also think it'll bring really good awareness to how women are treated in prison, because I don't think that's talked about enough. But for the sake of today's video, women were locked down in their cells basically all the time. So we were what was called 23-1 for months, and I spent 6 months in that county jail fighting my case and waiting to go to prison. So the females were kept 23-1, which means you're in your cell for 23 hours a day and you're allowed out of your cell for 1 hour a day. So sometimes we wouldn't even be allowed out of our cell the entire day, and they would serve us bag lunch. So a sack lunch is what they call it, and it would be a bologna sandwich, 2 cookies, a milk, and maybe one other thing, maybe like an apple or an orange or something. And I was always so grateful for fresh fruit, because you just did not get fresh fruit a lot. I know a lot of you guys asked me that. We could not order fresh fruit on commissary in prison or in county jail. And we also were not served fresh fruit very often. So I was always very happy to get an apple or an orange. Anyway, so we were locked down in our cell one day. I was at this time about 4 months pregnant, and in my cell, it was me and my homegirl Hollywood. You've heard me mention her a couple of times. At this time in Sebastian County Jail in Fort Smith, Arkansas, where my cell was, I think it was cell 24, and where I was able to see the front door, and there was 2 doors leading out to the hallway to get out of that pod. I think it was called CD pod, if I remember correctly. So there was 2 doors, and where my cell was, I could directly see the front door. Now, horizontally from that cell, there was another cell. Well, there's cells everywhere, but there was one cell in particular. A girl had run up to the door, and she's screaming and she's pounding on the door trying to get everyone's attention, and she said, "This girl's having a seizure, this girl's having a seizure." So in that specific county jail, they have like speakers in every cell. So a certain noise decibel is supposed to trigger the system, and you're supposed to be able to yell, and the people in the security room that has access to all the cameras, they're supposed to be able to hear what's going on and press a button to listen. So we're yelling and we're banging on the doors to try to get someone's attention because this girl is having a seizure. Now I can see the girl at the door, it's her cell, her cellie is having a seizure. I could see her panic. She was so scared. So I tried to get everyone to shut up so that I could tell her, you need to move her. Is she near a bed? Make sure she doesn't hit her head. I'm trying to communicate with her what a seizure protocol should be, because my mom is epileptic. My mom has seizures. So I'm trying to communicate with her, make sure she's not biting her tongue, make sure she's moved away from something so she's not gonna hit her head, because when you have a seizure, your mouth, your jaw tightens really hard, and if your tongue is in the way, you'll bite a chunk of your tongue off. It's really bad. So I'm trying to communicate that with her, but she's so panicked and there's so much noise that she can't hear me. So I am so scared for her and for her Sally. And we're banging on the door and Hollywood says, New York, it's my nickname. Why are you banging on the door? You are pregnant, sit down. But I was so panicked. I'm like, she doesn't understand. Let's try to write a note. But at that point, it was just too late for me to communicate with her how to help this person that was having a seizure anyway. Too much time had passed. So we're banging on the doors and we're screaming and we're just desperate for a CO to hear us or for someone to walk by and hear us, because we have no idea what's going on with this woman. We don't know if she's okay. We don't know if she's breathing. Her Sally has no idea how to handle someone with a seizure. She has no idea what to do. She has no idea if this person is okay. You guys, 3 hours went by. 3 hours went by. Finally, I see a guard at the door, at the second door, so in the hallway. It was a man. I saw him look in and then I saw him walk away and I was just heated, right? So then I finally saw a female officer come into the unit, and the female officer, she looked around and she goes, what? And she screams at everyone to shut up and to just have one person tell her what's wrong. And we, tell her the woman in that cell had a seizure. So she calls for backup and she calls for medical, and they come in and they open the door, and the cellie that got our attention was sitting on the table and she was visibly shaking. She was so scared because she was in this room alone and didn't know how to handle it. So the person that didn't have a seizure was sitting at the table in the day room, shaking and just kind of like rocking back and forth. She was so scared. She was frantic. You could just see that she was terrified at what she just witnessed. Medical comes in, an ambulance comes in finally, like the paramedics come in from the free world, and they put this woman on a stretcher and they take her out. You guys, she never came back. So when you're an inmate, you can't ask an officer what happened to that inmate that you took out. Is she okay? I mean, you can, but they're not gonna answer you. So we never knew what happened to that woman. We never knew if she passed away. We didn't know if she was going through some kind of withdrawal. It was just a seizure of some kind. They never told us any details of it. So we never knew what happened to her. But the fact that she didn't come back to the unit, it kind of just tells you right there what happened, right? So absolutely horrifying. And again, I just don't think the general public understands how ignored inmates are, especially female inmates in a lot of facilities. Because in that county jail specifically, Fort Smith in Sebastian County, the men were always out in the day room. They were never locked down except for at night. Women were locked down all day, every day. And to get out of your cell was a luxury and it was a privilege. And that was just gross to me, because every time I went to the hallway, I would see my friends in different pods. I would see them always out. And when I would write Jason, and you guys will meet him next year when he gets out of prison, when I would write Jason, he'd be like, yeah, we're never locked down. He'd be walking around in the halls, joking around with the officers, and we weren't even allowed out of our cell to take a shower, you guys. There's a whole video on why I think facilities are sexist, but that's a different video for a different time. I want to take you guys now to a maximum security prison. I was serving my last bit of time in McPherson Prison. It is a maximum security in southern Arkansas, in Newport, Arkansas to be exact. Now, this has housed death row inmates. This houses high security people, everyone from capital murder to my charges. Now, I was classified always as medium to maximum security because of my charges, because I had a gun, I had priors, I had warrants out in New York. That's just how they categorized me. So I was at a maximum security prison serving a segregation time of about 90 days because I got into a fight with a sex offender. And contrary to popular belief, sex offenders just walk the yard in female prisons. They're just walking around and they kind of click up together, and unless you beat one up, they stay in that unit. It's not like men. Men are very violent when it comes to that charge. It's the worst kind of charge that you can have. Men in prison will defend females and they will defend children. And if you hurt a child especially, you will get got in prison if you are a man. If you hurt a woman, you're probably gonna get hurt as well. Rape is the worst kind of charge you can have, and rape and hurting a child, worst kind of thing you can have as a man. So men will make sure that chomos are not walking the yard, but females, they're just out with everyone, and you'd be so surprised how many are there for that. It's awful. Anyway, that was why I was serving my segregation time, and I was actually kicked out of a medium security and sent back to the max. Those of you that have been watching my channel for a long time know that. I've said that many times. So I was in a segregation unit serving my time for getting into the fight. There are, I want to say 3 tiers. There's either 2 or 3 tiers on one wall and 2 or 3 tiers on another wall. The cell that I was at was on one side where I could see people coming in and out, and I could see the clock. The people that were on the other side couldn't see the clock. And it was just like a luxury that I was able to even see a clock. Most segregation units don't even allow a clock on the wall. It's really dumb. So a lot of times people would be like, yo, what time is it? And we'd have to tell them and communicate it to the other side of the tier. So this day started out like any other segregation day. We were woken up at about 4 for breakfast. The cold trays of food were put into our slot. Well, 4:30, we're fed our trays, and they come back around at 5 to pick up the trays. This specific morning, for whatever reason, I decided to stay awake. I usually went right back to sleep after I ate to try to just get as much sleep as possible, because all I wanted to do in seg was either work out, like run around the cell as much as I could, do burpees, work out to just feel better, because working out releases endorphins, and I would just try my absolute best to not lose my sanity in segregation, or I would try to go right back to sleep. So this morning in particular, for whatever reason, I just decided to stay awake and just kind of walk around my cell, which is not very much room at all. The officers had just started to pick up breakfast trays, and there was one cell in the corner that I could kind of see. I couldn't see everything in the cell, but I could see a little bit of what was going on, and that was on the bottom tier. Now I'm on the second tier, and I could look down into that cell somewhat, not really. And this specific person had many issues with, this might be triggering, so please pause it here. This specific inmate had issues with self-harm, and there was a lot of focus on that cell already for past mental health issues that she was having. So the officers started at her cell, or maybe the cell next to her, because that was like the beginning where they picked up trays, and they were going all around and picking up the trays. So the officers had picked up all the trays on one row on the bottom, on her row. Then they went up the stairs, did all the trays here, and walked on the tier, and were picking up trays on my row. And they were almost all, they couldn't have been further from her cell. They only probably had 4 or 5 cells left to pick up the trays. So now keep in mind, her cell is here. The officers are way up here. They're pretty far away from her cell. And she knew that the officers probably couldn't get there in time. Because you just know what the officers are doing. You know the officer's schedule. So out of nowhere, people on the bottom tier that could see directly into this woman's cell started screaming, and it's so echoey in these segregation units. Well, every unit is echoey, but they start yelling, and it doesn't even make sense. I can't understand what they're saying. People are pounding on the door and screaming and yelling, and the officers, who are way down here, they also can't understand what's going on, because it's just madness. So people just start screaming and banging on the doors, and it takes way too long, probably 45 seconds, for the officers to be like, shut up, one person tell me what. So finally the officer does that, and one person says, she's hanging. So the officers take off and they run. They run down the stairs, they run over to her cell, they're trying to unlock the door. But it was already too late. It was already too late from the time that it happened to the time that the officers could respond, and then the time that the officers took to get there, open the door, and take her down. It was too late. And, I'm sorry. everyone's told to shut up and get away from your door. And that always happens. That always happens in these units. If someone is hurt or something's going on with a specific inmate and you're locked down, you're always told, sit on your bed, sit on your rack, they call it rack, sit on your rack, get away from the door, don't get in the door. If I see anyone in the door, we're tacking on time to your segregation time or whatever. So we're told to get away from the door. And they look every now and then, but I'm like, you're not gonna tell me. I wanna know if she's okay, because I'm not gonna be able to even sleep tonight unless I know that she's okay. So I'm like way back here. I'm as far back as I can be from this door, but also looking out. They call medical, they call the nurse in. The nurse is kind of scrambling to get vitals. Now I can't see everything in the cell. All I can see is like half of her cell, probably not even half. So I can't see her, but I see a lot of people coming in and out, and I know that they're checking her vitals, and I know they're communicating with each other. And I saw one officer just shake his head, you know, when another person walked in. Is she okay? Is kind of, I feel like what was said, and the officer says no. I just saw him shake his head, but I don't know if that's what was said, right? I feel like a long time passed between taking her out of her cell and when the guards first realized what was going on. It felt like forever. So they eventually removed her, and I'm not going to go into a lot of the details here just for time's sake, but they removed her from the cell. And the officers, after everything was taken care of, I guess, and she was out of the cell and she was taken somewhere, I don't know where, the officer sat back down at their desk, and people are asking, and the officer says, shut up, mind your business, and kind of just yells at us. So we can't even ask him, is she okay? Was she okay? So after the officers sit down and we're basically instructed to not ever ask them about this, you see like a lot of the women like kind of talking back and forth, like their little sign language, and they're like talking about it, right? And we're just shocked. We're really just shocked at this. But within about an hour and a half after she left the unit and the officer sat back down at his desk, everyone returned to normal. Conversations returned back to normal. People were fishing, which means getting things from one cell to another. And then the girl straight across on the opposite tier says, yo, New York, what time is it? And I was like, what time? Someone just died probably, and you want to know what time it is? I was so mad, you guys, that no one seemed to care about this girl. And I understand that we all handle it in different ways, and I know that a lot of people handle these kinds of things differently than me, but I was just, the whole day I was just really sad. I didn't know her. I didn't know her first name. I didn't know why she was there. I didn't know what she was going through. I didn't know how long she had been there, but it just affected me all day and the next day, and it still is affecting me today to have to like, to even think about how upset she was and how miserable that she was, that she thought that was her only way out. That was affecting me very seriously. So I was so mad that this girl was like nonchalant, like, yo, what time is it? Like, it's just another day. Like we didn't just see what we saw. That I punched the door, and I still have a scar. I still have a lot of scars on my hand from punching things, but I was just so mad that no one seemed to care, and it so quickly returned to normal. Everything returned as normal. Lunch tray showed up as normal. Everyone ate like normal, and the whole day just returned back to its normal routine, and that's what prison life is like. Prison is a whole different world. And it's so weird and eerie how quickly things return to normal after something like that happens. And I think that just hit me different this time around. You know, there's a lot of different reasons why I have not returned to prison in 6.5, almost 7 years. I really did have a change of heart this time. I was so tired of it. I was so tired of the pain, of the trauma, of dealing with these things, of seeing these things, of being part of these things. I was so tired of it. I was so tired of the bullshit, and I just wanted to get my life together. I'm gonna end today's video here. I know today was heavy, but I wanted to share that experience with you guys because I think more people need to speak out about what that is actually like. And solitary confinement in its truest form, to me, is cruel and unusual punishment, because one of the worst things you can do to a human being is leave them alone. And segregation is awful. There are certain states that are banning solitary confinement, meaning that if you do go to solitary, you have a cellmate. And I feel like that is so much better than being by yourself. If you are not a danger to another person, I feel like you should be allowed to have a cellmate in segregation, and certain states like New York is doing that. So if you guys want to hear more about segregation, let me know in the comment section down below. I love you guys. Stay safe, stay sober. Please don't break the law because it is not worth it. And I will see you guys in my next one.